Super excited to get you all this because we've had time to dive into things. Plus, we actually have free agent landing spots. Like we know Najee Harris is a Los Angeles Charger. Maybe I'm overreacting to that. We'll talk about it later on. But tier one, I know a lot of people got very upset with us in the last time we made this video to go ahead and rank the 101 right alongside Bijan, right alongside Gibbs. I am sorry, and I will double down on this. I would not be surprised if, based on landing spot, Ashton Jeanty is the #1 running back in Dynasty when it comes to consensus rankings, ADP, whatever you want to reference after the NFL draft. Now, of course, we can look at Gibbs and we can say, oh my gosh, 21 points per game, 17 games played this past season. Phenomenal. He's my running back one in Dynasty. We can go through and we can look at Bijan Robinson and say, oh my gosh, this dude at 23 years old was just able to put up 20 fantasy points per game. And yes, it's phenomenal, but you're getting the 2 extra years on the rookie deal for a guaranteed round 1 NFL pick. If you get a good landing spot like Chicago, I mean, I think you can kind of go all in on Jeanty. And yes, he's in this tier right this second. Now let's go down to the next tier because this is where things maybe get a little bit more interesting. This is where you can actually begin to have some conversations, right? We're going to throw De'Von Achane here. I mean, if you're drafting in a redraft league, clearly you're taking Saquon Barkley. But with Achane, you are getting the extended runway where you've only played 2 seasons. Now, he was a second-round pick, so you don't have the 5th-year option on that rookie deal. Back-to-back seasons, over 17 fantasy points per game. Obviously, a lot of this relying on the receiving volume this past year. And that was the main thing that you needed to see, right? Because we can go back to his rookie season, and we can sit here and go, okay, yeah, this is a running back that averaged 7.8 yards per carry. The frame isn't particularly there for him to ever get to 300 touches in the season. So what you needed to see was a dramatic change in usage, particularly with him as a receiver. It's exactly what happened. He had 78 receptions, almost 600 receiving yards this past season. Doesn't hurt that he played 17 games, of course. That's great. And if you actually look at the historical comps that you have for Achane, a running back coming off his age 23 season, you're looking at running backs like Josh Jacobs, Maurice Jones-Drew, Reggie Bush. I mean, these guys that were running back ones in fantasy, right? But not necessarily the David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, prime Todd Gurley's of the world that are literally going to be the running back one overall. You are looking at about, I would say, 20 points per game expectation this next season. If he hits the high end, the mid-range would be about what he's been at 17.5. Going over looking at Saquon Barkley, Barkley just played his age 27 season. What's actually really funny with Barkley, obviously this doesn't matter much for his dynasty ranking, but if you actually look at the points per game back in 2018 as a Giant, he actually averaged more points per game in 2018. But still, I mean, you have just the safest projection you can possibly look at for this next season as a running back coming off 345 rush attempts, 2,000 yards rushing. The receiving volume, of course, isn't exactly what you'd want it to be, knowing that Jalen Hurts is going to have a lower checkdown rate in general, but it doesn't matter. He's the running back one in the short term. The Eagles just decided to go out of their way and give him an extension over the next 2 years as well. The only potential knock that you could have is going to be the age, but that's not going to be the end of the world. I'm going over and looking at what we have with our next tier, guys. We are going to put Bucky Irving here. Now, I know that some people are going to be upset with this ranking of Bucky, where you are looking at a running back that is coming off a phenomenal rookie season, where he goes through and he averages about 14.5 fantasy points per game. But if you look at this broken into the first half of the season, the second half of the year, he does legitimately turn out to be a league winner in the second half of the season. Hyper efficient. You're looking at 5.4 yards per carry. Yes, the receiving usage is there, and what honestly could be even better for Bucky this next season if we see an uptick with the receiving touchdowns that were just non-existent this past season. But one concern that I'm going to have with Bucky Irving is almost the same concern that we had, say, with De'Von Achane, right? Where you go through and you look at him and say, oh, okay, well, based off the frame that he has, I mean, this is a running back that weighed 192 pounds coming out. We're probably never expecting him to get to 300 carries in a season, right? That's not necessarily what you need to see. What you need to see is you need to see the expanded role, particularly as a receiver. He doesn't have the outlier type efficiency that Achane did as a rookie. Obviously looks great. I know it's aggressive with us ranking him behind the 104. I mean, if you're looking at the 104, I think that you are just going to get worst case scenario, the #1 overall quarterback drafted, or best case scenario, Hampton finds himself a dream landing spot. Ted McMillan finds himself a great landing spot. These rookie picks we are comparing players to are for super flex rookie drafts, not one quarterback leagues. Now going over and looking at Breece Hall, with Breece, 3 straight seasons of fantasy relevance. However, this past year was the worst year of his career from a fantasy points per game perspective. You actually see the efficiency drop for 3 straight years now, going from 5.8 to 4.5 to 4.2 yards per carry. Now, of course, Aaron Rodgers wasn't great this past season, but if you're going to look at the expectations that this team should have going into this next year, I would personally project the New York Jets to be a bottom 10 offense in the NFL. So then you're kind of in a very similar setup as you were a year ago, where you're a running back that, yes, is talented, but you're in a crap offense. And the concern with Justin Fields under center is you're actually going to have a lower check down rate, and that receiving volume where you saw him get to 95 targets 2 seasons ago is probably not going to be there. Now, of course, you can see the receiving volume go away for running back like Saquon Barkley when he gets attached to a mobile quarterback, but if Saquon Barkley is in the best offense in the NFL, frankly, it doesn't matter. That's just not going to be the situation here for Breece. And he is also going to be playing under the last year of his rookie deal this season. Now, going over and looking at our next back, I'm going to throw Jonathan Taylor in here. With Taylor, it is surprising to see this if you just zoom out and look at the points per game. And Jonathan Taylor is constantly dealing with nagging injuries, right? You're looking at 15 games played as a rookie, 11 games played in 2022, 10 games played in 2023, 14 games played in 2024. So maybe that's why it feels like Jonathan Taylor really hasn't been that league winner since 2021. But the points per game have been very consistent, even in a garbage offense this past season in Indianapolis. You had Jonathan Taylor sitting there at about 17.5 fantasy points per contest. That's with no receiving volume. So I don't necessarily know if that can get that much worse. And yes, the quarterback situation is going to be very bad. We're not necessarily expecting Anthony Richardson all of a sudden turn out to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this next season. But you do, at the worst case scenario, have Daniel Jones that you can go to. It's going to be a bad offense, but very similar to Breece Hall. So running back that's shown it over a large sample that he is going to be an above average player. You are going to have the rushing efficiency. You do have the guaranteed money in 2025. If you're looking at the cap situation in 2026, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't produce in Indianapolis, he could be a cut candidate where they could save $13 million. And honestly, for that reason, if you wanted to put Chase Brown ahead of Jonathan Taylor, not going to fault you for it. And honestly, if Chase Brown dodges the NFL draft where you don't have to see Hampton join his backfield, you don't have to see Judkins, Henderson, any of these running backs go to Cincinnati, I probably will move Chase Brown ahead of Jonathan Taylor. If you're looking at the age comparison, Chase Brown's going to be a year younger. Chase Brown has an extra year on his rookie deal. And if you're looking at the points this past season, Chase Brown was actually at 15.9 fantasy points per game. And that's also including the fact that Zach Moss was the starter to begin the year, where Chase Brown didn't come on till later in the season. You had the receiving skill set, maybe a little unsustainable with its touchdown rate, particularly with the receiving volume, with 4 touchdowns coming off of only 65 targets. But it's an elite offense. Right now, Chase Brown is coming off an efficient season in said offense. He is the starting running back. The only concern, of course, is these running backs that don't have the team investment. If they see a rookie like Hampton get added to their backfield, their value could get cut in half overnight. Kyren Williams, kind of the same scenario here, right? I mean, you have an underwhelming rookie running back added in the 3rd round last year, Blake Corum, and that takes a hit to Kyren Williams' value. Frankly, ends up not mattering, but this is the last year of his rookie deal. He has been pretty inefficient back as well. If you look at advanced metrics, I mean, this is a running back that off of 40 targets this past season, actually only had 182 receiving yards, but he's been a workhorse. He's been the outlier of all outliers. You go back to that 2022 draft class, we had never seen a running back before Kyren Williams test as slow as he did, while at the same time being as small as he did, to ever come through and post anything close to what Kyren's been able to do with 21 fantasy points per game in 2023 and 17 fantasy points per game this past season. But only 1 year left on the deal. Should be a good offense, but you do have that competition with the NFL draft possibly being added. James Cook, same thing here, possibly. You have competition coming in the draft. And of course, I'm not saying that Buffalo, Los Angeles, or Cincinnati are going to take a running back. I just want to acknowledge the fact that you can get Trey Mason, right? That is a possibility here for these guys that are on the last year of their rookie deal. which James Cook is. James Cook has the best year of his NFL career this past season with about 16.5 fantasy points per game. Super impressive, knowing the fact that Josh Allen's still taking rushing touchdowns, and James Cook managed to score 16 rushing touchdowns in his own right. I'm going down another tier. We're looking at Josh Jacobs here as a running back that does get that bump in a better offense this past season with 17 fantasy points per game, but drafted back in 2019. This is going to be his 7th season in the league. He is going to be 27 years old. So Jacobs, great example of a running back that really only makes sense on a contending build. If you're a contender, I think you can get him at a great price here, around the 108, 109 in a Superflex league. If you're looking at the contract situation, he really doesn't have any guaranteed money past 2025, where if you're looking at 2026, they could save $8 million from moving on from him. 2027, they could save $13 million moving on from him. So I think you're looking at like a 1 to 2 year window here with Jacobs if you're a contending roster to get some solid production. Obviously, I'm not expecting Jacobs to be like a top 3 running back in fantasy this next year like Barkley, or he would be higher. Somebody that can be a top 3 running back, but's even older, is going to be McCaffrey. San Francisco is changing everything, right? I mean, every single day, it seems like I'm having to update the Niners rankings, whether that's Ricky Pearsall, whether that's Brandon Ayuk, as we get rumors out. And of course, you can check out all the updated rankings whenever you want on flockfantasy.com. But with CMC, it's very difficult to project going forward. The one thing I want to point out is what we have historically seen is when these running backs get older, which McCaffrey is a very old running back at this point. He was drafted in 2017, so 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. He's going to go into his 9th NFL season this year. Now, he's a younger running back, only going to be 29 years old, which is very impressive, and he has all the guaranteed money in the world. I mean, they really can't save anything by cutting him, and really until 2027, they'll probably cut him and save $20 million, but looks like he's probably locked in this year, probably locked in next year as well. But anyway, when these older running backs start to get injured, it actually does become a very concerning thing, where if we look at the best age 29 running back seasons since the year 2000, you have Priest Holmes, Tiki Barber, Matt Forte, Marshall Faulk, Brian Westbrook, Alvin Kamara, Michael Pittman, LT, LaShawn McCoy, Darren Sproles. And what's very interesting is if you actually look at these top seasons, not a single one of these running backs dealt with injuries the year prior. I mean, yeah, Priest Holmes, 16 games played the year before. Tiki Barber, 16, then 16, 14, 15, 13, 16, 16, 15, 16, 16. Like, we did not see any 28-year-old running back go down for the season and then bounce back in a big-time way at 29, particularly with an injury that we don't have a lot of information for as well. So I think naturally you are taking on some risk with CMC. But of course, with that being said, it's a running back that 2 years ago averaged 24.5 fantasy points per game. If you bought him as a contender and he repeats that this next season, you will literally win your league because of it. Kenneth Walker will be the next back. With Kenneth Walker, the points per games actually looked really good. He had 16.5 fantasy points per game this past season. Of course, running back that's dealt with injuries through his time in the NFL. And what's actually really surprising with Walker is the receiving volume, where you get 53 targets through only 11 games played this past season. Where historically what we had seen is we had seen Charbonnet at least 2 years ago really operate in that third down role, and Kenneth Walker was limited to being a first and second down back. This coaching staff really wanted to use Kenneth Walker as a receiver, but this is going to be Kenneth Walker's last year on his rookie deal, right? So it's just very difficult to project out what you're going to have with running backs of this ilk. I'm going through and looking at the range of outcomes, what we've seen running backs with similar age 24 seasons to Kenneth Walker in the past. You had Matt Forte, Lamar Miller, Rashad White, James Conner, Ramondre Stevenson. Travis Etienne's on this list, so you do have a little bit of a wider range. I'm going down to our next tier. I know that I am lower on Chuba Hubbard than a lot of people. At least I've found that I am lower on Chuba Hubbard than a lot of people. And of course, I got to give the guys flowers. We kept on saying every week, oh, I don't know if Chuba Hubbard's going to do this for that much longer, but I guess start him this week. He's crushing. We said that over and over again, and the dude crushed from the beginning of the season all the way through the end. Averaged 16.1 fantasy points per game through 15 games played this past year. You have the receiving usage where you get 54 targets. Now, for those 54 targets, the dude has 171 receiving yards. I don't know if there was a more inefficient running back in the NFL this past year. Don't want to blame it on Chuba Hubbard, though, because, I mean, if you go back and if you look at this Carolina Panthers offense, Carolina is one of the worst offenses in the league. Now, my question to you, my question to everybody here, and why I'm lower on Chuba Hubbard than most, is do we expect that to change? Because for me personally, I am still projecting the Carolina Panthers, where their wide receiver one is arguably Xavier Legette, to be one of the league's worst offenses this next season. They bring in Rico Dowdle as some competition. I'm not saying it's a lot of competition, but they signed Dowdle. You're in a bottom offense. This is an outlier type season. It takes you 4 years in your NFL career to be fantasy relevant. I know you have the contract that guarantees that he's with this team in 2025. If you're looking at 2026, he's probably with the team as well because he's not going to be getting paid much. Probably with this team for the next 2 years. So I'll give him his credit because in comparison to like Joe Mixon, like, to be honest with you, I'd probably rather have Mixon for this next season. But obviously Mixon, older running back, you look at the contract situation in Houston. And while yes, Mixon's guaranteed to be with this team this year, if you look at the next year, Houston could save $8.5 million from moving on from Joe Mixon in 2026. So I would almost expect that Mixon will not be a Texan when he is 30 next season, and he will be having to figure something else out. Now, of course, he is younger than some of these other running backs that were drafted in 2017. So I do think that it's not a guarantee this is last year in the NFL or last year of fantasy relevance. I honestly kind of like going in on this Texans offense with a little bit of a year 3 bounce back with CJ Stroud. Obviously, a ton of changes with what they've had with the offensive line. Going over and looking at Derrick Henry, we were too low on Derrick Henry last year, undoubtedly so, right? Like, we can go through and we can look at Derrick Henry being an outlier, putting up one of the best age 30 seasons that we've ever seen since the year 2000. So the last 25 years, there have only been 3 running backs to post a better age 30 season than Derrick Henry. And that was Priest Holmes, Tiki Barber, Charlie Garner. So we hadn't seen it in 20 years. Tiki Barber in 2005 was the last time we had seen over 20 fantasy points per game. Derrick Henry almost got there. And what I want to point out here as well is Derrick Henry isn't like a spring chicken when we're counting this as his age 30 season. Derrick Henry turns 31 at the end of the year in January. So it's right there for being his age 31 season. And if it would have been the case, Derrick Henry would have put up the best age 31 season, I don't want to say in NFL history, but at least since year 2000, at least over the past 25 years. But if we go over and if we actually look at what those age 30 season running backs did the following season, I hate to say it, but yes, even some of the best running backs ever, such as Priest Holmes, great running backs, such as Tiki Barber, such as Adrian Peterson, who put up 16.7 fantasy points per game at 30, such as Matt Forte, who put up 16.7, such as Mark Ingram, but great running backs, right? I want to say Derrick Henry is a Hall of Famer. You have a 90% chance of declining going into your age 31 season. If we are looking at the amount of running backs to actually average more than 16 fantasy points per game, 16, much lower bar at age 31 the following year, you had 5 guys that have been able to do it the last 25 years. The last 20 years, you had 1 guy do it, and that was Raheem Mostert. So, Father Time, I hate to say this because we said it last year and it's completely wrong, of course. But if you look at the historical data, even Hall of Fame level running backs like Adrian Peterson, Father Time gets him. So I will probably be underweight Derrick Henry. If you're a contending team, you got 1 year with Derrick Henry left. And if he repeats what he did last year, buying him for the 201 is obviously a smash play. Going over and looking at David Montgomery, a little bit younger, right? 27-year-old. You have to deal with the offensive coordinator changing. You don't necessarily know exactly what that means for this run game. If you look at the historical data, 27-year-old running backs that comped similarly to David Montgomery are Joe Mixon, Mark Ingram, Reggie Bush, Warrick Dunn, Aaron Jones, James Conner. If you're looking at what these running backs did the following season, there were 3 running backs that were actually able to improve. The 7 other backs did get worse. So, of course, I'm not going to surprise you. Most running backs get worse when they are 28 years old. While at the same time, I would actually expect that Jahmyr Gibbs continues to improve. You can see Gibbs, the number one player on this list. And if you go through and if you look at the contract situation for Montgomery, I think it's a very safe bet to be with this team in 2026. They can only save about $4 million. They could save about $8 million in 2027 when Montgomery is 30. So I'd imagine Montgomery probably has 2 more years with the Lions. Going over and looking at Alvin Kamara, again, same thing with Derrick Henry, right? Kamara has beaten Father Time over and over and over again. From a PPR perspective, if you go back to 2017, I would make the argument that Alvin Kamara has been the best fantasy football asset for almost a decade now. 2017, 19.5 points per game, 23.5, 18, 25, 18, 14, 18, 19. Kamara has been phenomenal. The receiving usage has been extremely consistent. And what's very impressive and almost unbelievable about the past 4 years, where Kamara is averaging about 16 fantasy points per game, is the dude hasn't had a season with 10 or more touchdowns. So we can sit here and go, oh my gosh, Alvin Kamara is going to be in a bad offense. He's been in a bad offense and he's still producing to this level, particularly in full PPR formats. You look at the historical comps from Alvin Kamara's age 29 season. You have guys like Marshall Faulk, Matt Forte, LT. You have Hall of Fame level running backs out here, right? And what they were able to do the next year, one guy was able to hit 20 fantasy points per game. Matt Forte was able to hit 16.5. Then LT fell down to 12.9. But nonetheless, every single running back got worse going from age 29 to age 30, which should be the expectation. I do have to reiterate it because obviously all these old guys crushed last year, but we still got to look at the historical data. Looking at Najee Harris, this is a running back that I don't even know if we included him on the rankings list last time. I think he's a complete dust ball, but he finds himself in arguably the best landing spot you could possibly imagine. And he gets himself a really strong contract as well. I don't want to say it guarantees him the starting job. I mean, of course, the Chargers could always get on the clock, and in round 2, I mean, a 1-year Najee Harris deal isn't going to stop them from taking Hampton if they absolutely love Hampton, right? But if we go back and if we look at what this team was able to do last year, I mean, this is a team that gave, I want to say, a total of 463 rushing attempts across their roster. And how many passing attempts did Herbert have? Like 500? It's almost a 1-to-1 split in terms of passing attempts to rushing attempts in this offense. This is a rush first team. It's a team with a ton of first round picks on the offensive line. Should be an above average NFL team with positive game scripts this next season. The main question that I would have is going to be centered around the receiving involvement for Najee. You actually had Najee almost up at 18 fantasy points per game in his rookie season in 2021, but a lot of that was off the back that, I mean, he had 74 receptions that season. Since then, you've seen 41, 29, 36. So you've seen the receiving volume fall off dramatically. If Najee Harris is the back that's in this offense running routes, drawing targets, and getting the early down work, which is a possibility. I mean, look at the depth chart. Najee Harris could be the straight up bell cow. It's in the range of outcomes that Najee puts up one of the grossest seasons ever from a volume perspective. And in a PPR format, if the receiving volume's there the way it was his rookie season, be a high-end RB2, low-end RB1, which is disgusting, but it is what it is. Tyrone Tracy is going to be another one of these running backs that I'd imagine there are people higher than me on him. I'm sorry, the dude averaged 10.5 fantasy points per game last season. I understand as a rookie, but it's not like he improved that much better as the season went on. And I know he was a rookie, but Tyrone Tracy was 25 years old. Like, let me grab a running back on this list that is probably younger than Tracy that's been in the NFL for years. How old's Breece Hall in comparison to Tyrone Tracy? Breece Hall has played 3 seasons. Breece Hall age. Breece Hall is going to turn 24 May 31st. He was born in 2001. Tyrone Tracy age. Tyrone Tracy was born in 1999. Turns 26 in November. And of course, I'm not saying, oh, that means that Tyrone Tracy is going to fall off when he's 30. No, I don't care about any of that. Like Tyrone Tracy, if he gives you 4 years as a starting running back, then, oh my gosh, he's severely underranked here. But my thing is, he doesn't have any team investment. The rookie season was whatever. If a 21-year-old puts up a whatever rookie season, you can make an argument for room for improvement. but I don't know how much room there is to improve at 26. Typically, the 25 is the peak of running backs. And also, it's a garbage offense, right? So I'm not super excited about it. Going over and looking at James Conner. Conner's a running back that finally, for the first time in his NFL career, did not have to deal with injuries in 2024. Saved my butt in the flock league. Probably the only reason, Jamar Chase, obviously, but James Conner saved my running back room and maybe the main reason I got a buy in the flock league this past year. But realistically speaking, he's going to be going into his age 29 season. This team that went out of their way to draft the second running back off the board in the NFL draft last year. Yes, he has guaranteed money on his deal for this season, but they're almost guaranteed to cut him next year when they could save $8 million. So you get 1 year of James Conner in this offense. I think that this offense is going to be worse than Houston's. I think this offense is going to be worse than like Baltimore. So if I'm like investing into 1 year rentals at running back, I'd probably rather do it with a running back that doesn't have an injury history while at the same time is in a better offense. Now, going over and looking at Isaiah Pacheco, one thing I'm really surprised by is particularly where Pacheco is getting drafted in redraft leagues like best ball leagues right now. Because if you look at underdog drafts, this dude's pretty much priced in as if the Kansas City Chiefs are going to replace him. And you look at this past year, obviously the numbers are absolutely disgusting, right? But the biggest surprise is Pacheco comes back from his injury. And you're expecting, at least I'm expecting, okay, he's slowly but surely going to take the role from Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt, the dude that was, probably lifting at Anytime Fitness to start the season, just chilling. Kareem Hunt comes in halfway through the year. Is it a bad starting running back for the Chiefs? I don't want to sit here and act like Kareem Hunt was great. Once Pacheco came back, I thought he was going to be able to take Kareem Hunt's job. It just simply never happened. Like literally, even once you get to the playoffs, when Pacheco's that far removed from his injury, plus Pacheco is on the final year of his rookie deal, you have no team investment whatsoever, right? So Pacheco could be a name that you just never hear from again 12 months from now. But also, he could be the starting running back in the league's best offense this next season, so you don't really know. Zach Charbonnet will be our next guy. With Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker's on the last year of his rookie deal. Every chance that Charbonnet's had, he's looked great. He's been able to go out there and command a 3-down workload. 52 targets, 340 receiving yards this past season. So the receiving efficiency's there. He has the size to be a 3-down player. Great prospect coming out of UCLA. So if Seattle decided to actually let Walker walk and give Charbonnet the starting job, I think Charbonnet honestly could be an argument to be a running back one for an entire season. Brian Robinson will be our next guy. The main thing is, what's the upside with Robinson, right? Even this past year where the offense was dramatically better, 11.5 fantasy points per game. Dusty old Eckler's taking receiving involvement. So last year of your rookie deal, we have seen no upside from you your entire NFL career. I don't really see much. Tony Pollard, you get a 1 year rental and a horrible offense. Tony Pollard's guaranteed to be the running back here in Tennessee this next season. They're just simply paying him too much money. They're going to cut him next year. Like they could go through and I think they could save $12.5 million from cutting him in 2026. So you're going to get 1 year out of Tony Pollard. It maybe catches some balls, but honestly, I think I should probably move Aaron Jones ahead of Pollard. The thing with Jones is we have seen the consistent decline. We haven't seen him average 15 fantasy points per game since 2021. I think you probably expect some regression for this Minnesota Vikings offense this next season. But Aaron Jones did only have 7 touchdowns this past year off of 300 total opportunities. So if the touchdown rate goes up with the new contract that he has, he's also pretty much just going to be a 1 year rental. He's definitely older. He's going to be 31 this next season. If you look at the historical comps, not great, but it is what it is. Ramondre Stevenson, this is a bigger conversation. You can tell this entire tier is like, I don't know what to expect. You go after your guy, especially like guys like Stevenson, ETN, Warren, DeAndre Swift. You're just betting that competition won't be brought in through the draft, right? So it is really much get your guy, but a side conversation. It is very interesting seeing pretty much every wide receiver turn down to go to New England. And all of a sudden it going from this is the offseason that Drake May gets weapons to it may be a tough scene for Patriots owners unless you really just believe Drake May is some top level quarterback. Travis Etienne looks like a complete dust ball, right? Where Etienne falls off to 8.5 fantasy points per game this past season, back-to-back years under 4 yards per carry. Jaylen Warren does see an efficiency drop off this past season, at least as a rusher. But Warren right now looks to be the starting running back in Pittsburgh. And if they can get Rodgers, should be a little bit of a better offense. And Swift here, you just have, frankly, no idea if Chicago is going to go through and take Genty. Swift could be an absolute zero, or he could be the starting running back in a Ben Johnson offense that is looking to improve. But I think that's where our running back rankings stand for now. Of course, if you want to see exactly how we rank the rookies, or if you ever want to just stay up to date with all our rankings or the rankings of pretty much everybody you watch on YouTube, you find it all on flockfantasy.com. I'll leave the link in the description, comment section. You can also link your dynasty team for completely free. That way you can go through and see what you need to work on, etc., etc., etc. You've already heard it 1,000 times. Link will be in the description, comment section. I really do think it'll help you out, and we have a bunch of free stuff out there for you. But really appreciate you, and